Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here with us. Of course, all of you know who is joining me today. Mr. Scott Ritter is back. I'm very grateful as always for Scott's time. Thank you so much for coming back, Scott, for another important conversation today.
Thanks for having me.
And before we start with the politics and geopolitics and all important topics, I want to officially thank you, which I haven't before the live stream started, for making such a big impact on me getting to 100,000 subscribers. All of my guests are very important, but it was your recommendation about 2 weeks ago and actually you were the first person I emailed when I reached that goal, and I'm very, very grateful. And I have to read you this comment because I thought of you when someone said this. Private no one 8111, he said 100,000, it's a small army. Congratulations, General. I mean, I'm not, but that's a good comment.
Well, congratulations. I'm very proud of you and very impressed by your accomplishments.
Thank you. With my broken English, I'm trying my best to bring some political approach from a regular person, trying to make sense of the current events. Where shall we start? I am actually now a little bit not sure because I prepared a very long intro knowing what's going on in Poland, but we will go there as a second option. The first question I think I have to start with is what President of Russia, President Putin, said today. As we all know, he gave annual address to the nation. Interesting, I was actually in Moscow last year when this was happening too. He said those words, which I am absolutely certain you already know, about the nuclear threat. We also have weapons. They know, means West, they know about this. As I just said, we also have a weapon that can hit targets on their territory, and they should understand what they are doing, trying to scare the whole world. It does risk a conflict with the nuclear weapons, which means the destruction of civilization. Do they understand this or what? So, Scott, would you like to address those words? There are many other statements, but especially this one.
Sure. I mean, excuse me. It's wintertime, so even Marines get colds. But I think we have to look at it in the context of what happened just prior to this, and what's been happening for some time now. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, convened a meeting in Europe where he floated the notion that individual European nations, including NATO nations, could enter into unilateral individual security arrangements with Ukraine that would allow for them to deploy their military forces on Ukrainian soil, not necessarily to go to the front line, but to free up Ukrainian forces that are otherwise engaged in rear area security operations and make them available for frontline service. The situation on the battlefield in Ukraine is dire. They are running out of manpower. They are running out of equipment. We're seeing the collapse of the combat cohesion of the Ukrainian forces, and so there's a need for an immediate infusion of troops that Ukraine doesn't otherwise have. If you recall, when General Zaluzhny was being retired for encouraged to resign by Zelensky, one of the big issues that split the two was the notion of how to rapidly mobilize 500,000 men, 500,000 men. How do you get those numbers in a time frame that is realistic? And the answer is you don't. And so Ukraine really has no other option right now. If Ukraine removes these reserves, they create an unstable situation in their rear area that can be exploited by Russian deep reconnaissance groups, create the potential of a Russian incursion out of Belarus, Russian incursions towards Kiev, places right now where there are reserves that make this more difficult. These reserves would no longer exist. So Macron floated this idea. But people need to remember that when Vladimir Putin announced the initiation of the special military operation back in February of 2022, he straight up said that any NATO intervention in Ukraine will bring about a Russian response that will lead to the inevitability of an armed conflict, which will likewise inevitably become nuclear in nature. So don't think about it. Well, Macron is obviously thinking about it. There's some fundamental flaws in Macron's thinking. You know, I don't know if he thinks that these nations, even though they deploy unilaterally, that he thinks that what will Article 5 of NATO's charter be invoked if, let's say, France sends French troops to Ukraine based upon a bilateral relationship with Ukraine outside of the framework of NATO, that Article 5 would kick in? I mean, what is Macron thinking? We don't know, but it doesn't matter. Article 5 or not, it would be an intervention in Ukraine that creates an existential threat to Russia and would require a Russian nuclear response. And so Vladimir Putin was putting that marker on the table, reminding everybody that this is real. And he said something else too. It wasn't just about Russia's nuclear capability. He spoke about Russia itself. He said that it's time that the West stop playing games in Ukraine. There are red lines, but these games that are being played are designed to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia. NATO and the United States have said this straight up. Jens Stoltenberg has said this several times. Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, has likewise said that the goal of the United States is the strategic defeat of Russia. And we're using Ukraine as a proxy to accomplish this. And what Putin is saying is that Russia will not be strategically defeated. It's not going to happen. Russia is a viable nation state, not just a viable nation state, but Russia is one of the most important states in the world. Not the most important, but a important member of the global community. That Russian civilization is one of the foundational civilizations of the world. That the Russian nation, will have its rightful place in the global hierarchy, and that the West's effort to destroy Russia will not be tolerated. That Russia will defend its right to exist with the weapons that it possesses, including nuclear weapons. Putin's once again repeated something he said before, that there cannot be a world without Russia. There cannot be a world without Russia. So if people are thinking that the world will be a better place if they can somehow strategically defeat Russia, they need to rethink, because the reality is, if they ever succeeded in this, then the world would end, because there won't be a world without Russia.
Yes, absolutely. But here I want to bring something, Scott, and I'm sure you know about it, but here are a few details from the Polish political scene. I actually written down the exact words of some Polish politicians that maybe some people have not come across. Few of them you have, but not all of them, which are very important because, as you know, a few days ago, Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, which I very, very much appreciate, made a statement for all the world to know that they are planning to send NATO troops to, not Slovakia, but other countries, EU countries, NATO countries, planning to send those troops to Ukraine. I would like to say here first, before I ask you my question, so everyone, I apologize if it's a long intro, but those words are very important. We had several events in Poland within a very short period of time, because in my mind at this point is zero doubt that Poland will do it under the umbrella of demining or peacekeeping or something of this nature. We had the Speaker of Polish Parliament, Scott, who is the second person after the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda. His name is Szymon Hołownia. He was campaigning with his party, but he is the Speaker of the Polish Parliament of Sejm, and he said those words: "We will smash Putin into the ground. Sooner or later, he will end up where he belongs, behind the bars or in the cemetery." He said it. So this is preparing the population for certain moves, 100%. And then we had Polish Prime Minister, as I say, new/old, because he have done this already, Donald Tusk, who said those words actually with very nervous tone of voice. It's serious. He said, "We are all really very concerned. We in Poland also have to pass the most difficult exam in recent years. I don't want to dazzle the Polish public opinion with too strong statements, but believe me, the situation in which Europe, Ukraine, and Poland find themselves requires focus, energy, and maximum solidarity, their favorite word, right? Not only with Ukraine, but also with entire Polish nation, because the challenges that lie ahead of us are truly the first of this kind situation for several dozen years, read World War II, my comment. And that's why I'm so concerned about it, because the situation is really critical. And the third point here, again, apologies, it's long, it all makes sense at the end. I don't know if ever in the history, both Polish Prime Minister and Polish President have been invited to the White House at the same time. And they are going on March 12th. So in my opinion, Scott, yes, France does not have to send the troops, right? Germany does not have to. And I'm not an expert, but what country would you send troops first as a peacekeeper or demining operation? From the country that usually has been sacrificed in those kind of projects and is the neighbor of Ukraine and Russia, Poland. So I would like to know your thoughts if they do this as peacekeeping or demining excuse, what this can turn into. How do you think they are planning to do it?
Well, first of all, there's no doubt in my mind that the collective West is looking, and you see more and more this terminology coming out, for a negotiated settlement, a negotiated conclusion to this conflict. And what they're looking for is a frozen conflict to bring about a ceasefire. The moment you have a ceasefire is when I think Poland would dispatch peacekeeping troops or demining troops, but not until then. First of all, let's understand this. You can't have a peacekeeping force if one side doesn't want to have peace. And Russia is not going to allow Poland to dispatch military forces to Ukraine. It's just straight up not going to happen. Those forces will be destroyed. But not just those forces will be destroyed, Poland will be destroyed, because Russia will destroy the decision-making centers. And Tusk should have nervousness in his voice, and I hope somebody from Tusk's administration is listening to this. You do know that he's a dead man walking, and you do know that the prime minister is a dead man. This isn't Ukraine. This isn't a special military operation. If Poland sends forces into Ukraine, Poland has made a decision, because Russia's told them what the consequences are, that they're at war with Russia, and Russia will treat Poland as a nation at war with Russia. So Russia will destroy Poland's decision-making capabilities. That's the parliament, that's the prime minister's offices, that's the president and his administration, that's the Ministry of Defense, that's everything will be destroyed. And Poland has no defense against this other than Article 5. But if Poland acts in a manner which is unilateral without the approval of NATO, no Article 5 protections attach. And Russia will be putting NATO on notice. And Russia is more than happy to make an example out of Poland, I believe. And they're going to put NATO on notice that this will not be tolerated. Now, that doesn't mean that Poland gets nuked right off the bat. I think Russia has more than sufficient conventional military capacity to destroy Poland as a functioning military power. But the signal to NATO is, now if you want to step in with Article 5, we'll take it to the next level, which is nuclear war. And then the question is NATO willing to sacrifice everything for Polish stupidity? Because this is the epitome of stupidity on the part of Poland. They've made a gambit. They invested in a project in Ukraine that has not paid off. They're losing their investment. Russia's winning this conflict. Russia will destroy the Zelensky government. Russia will destroy the Banderist, nationalism of Ukraine. Russia will destroy this NATO proxy army that has been built. Russia is destroying it as we speak. And I think that we're going to see Russia making sure that there is no ceasefire, there is no pause that can be misinterpreted or exploited by Poland or any other Western nation, that there will be a continuity of this conflict, until which time all objectives have been reached. Um, so I think what is happening here is that Poland's getting ahead of itself, meaning that Poland is talking as if there's already going to be a ceasefire, already going to be some sort of negotiated settlement. But the Russians have made it clear, at least for now, that that's not anything that they're going to entertain. If there is going to be a negotiation, Russia has said it will be based upon the reality as exists on the ground, not the fantasies that exist in Warsaw or any other European capital city.
So, Scott, who will be, because Zelensky now is talking to, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if he went to Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah.
Does he want them to be the middleman to negotiate the peace, to help with this? I'm kind of confused because on one hand, he's still asking for support and of course for the money. And on the other hand, he's talking to certain people in Middle East to create maybe peace negotiations. So what's going on really here? I'm very confused with this.
I think it's politics right now. I think right now Zelensky's under a lot of pressure from a number of entities, including Saudi Arabia, Middle Eastern partners, NATO, the United States, to start considering a diplomatic off-ramp, that everybody recognizes that Ukraine can't win this war, and that if they continue, Russia will probably achieve some sort of strategic military victory that would be extraordinarily detrimental not only for Ukraine, but for the West's current posturing vis-a-vis Russia. And so what he's saying is, I am open to negotiations, but he has the Zelensky formula, which means that Russia will withdraw back to the 1991 borders. Russia will pay reparations. Russia will turn over Putin and the Russian government to the International Criminal Court. I mean, it's just totally unrealistic things, but he wants to be seen as, being willing to engage in negotiations. So as to say, look, I'm willing to try, but because Russia now won't engage in negotiations, we have to come up with an alternative plan. So I think that's what the Saudi Arabia, my understanding, has played a role in facilitating the exchange of prisoners of war in the past. And because they have this ability to communicate with the Russians, Zelensky's taking advantage of it. But remember, the Saudis hosted a Jeddah conference, a peace conference, a while back about Ukraine, and they couldn't get any statements out of that. So I don't think you're going to see any movement on this.
Thank you, Scott. So here I want to ask you about Belarus. Recently, I was listening. I'm not sure if this is weekly or monthly, when President of Belarus, Lukashenko, addresses the generals and the officials in the army. And in one of those meetings, he was on stage, he was openly talking about that Belarusian intelligence has the information about how they are planning to create false flag, events, and this will be turned against Polish people. Polish government is doing this, right, against Polish people. And my thoughts on this here are, how this could unfold. Can you envision the scenario that they are going to create some form of event of such a nature, and then of course blame it on Russia, and this will be enough of the excuse for them then to send those troops? It's my simple way of thinking. I'm not an expert. It's just
No. I mean, the problem is being is being too cute. And I don't mean you. I mean these schemers, these plotters. It's like me looking at a guillotine, knowing that if I put my head in the guillotine and the blade comes down, I lose my head. But thinking that I could fool the people into believing that I wasn't putting my head in the guillotine, that I was actually doing something different. But the end result is my head's in the guillotine and the blade's going to come down. And what I mean by this is that no matter what conditions exist, I don't care what justification Poland cooks up, putting Polish troops on the ground in Ukraine will result in the destruction of Poland. There's no way to get from where Poland is today to that outcome without the destruction of Poland. And so they can play cute games all they want. They can do false flags. They can do anything they want. The moment Polish troops cross the border into Ukraine, Poland's at war with Russia, and you're not going to change that outcome. Now, if Tusk is, making the calculation that says that the hardest hurdle for me to cross is the approval of the Polish people, that he's already accepted, that he's going to go to Ukraine, and what, he doesn't believe Russia's going to go to war, that he's calling Russia's bluff, that the only thing he has to worry about is the opinion of the Polish people, then maybe that makes sense. But again, I mean, if anybody from his administration's watching this broadcast, you do understand that if you go into Ukraine, you will all die. That's the end of Poland. That's just the way it is. So, I don't know what's going on with Poland. I don't mean to be insulting of the Polish people, but the Polish government is in many ways like the governments of the three Baltic states, very irresponsible. They've imbued themselves with this artificial sense of accomplishment that they are somebody because they've joined NATO, because they're a frontline state against Russia, and they're able to get the attention of NATO and the United States, who provides some military assistance, etc. They suddenly believe that they are the decision makers. Let me make the record clear. Poland makes no decisions for NATO. None. Zero. Doesn't count. You don't count. Neither do the Baltic states. You're not decision makers. You're tools, just like Ukraine is a tool. And at some point in time, if you become inconvenient, the tool will be discarded. So Poland needs to understand its place in the world today. You're not a superpower. You're not a European power. You're not a power. You exist. And because of the geographical reality of your existence, you have some relevance. But the moment you become inconvenient to the West, the moment you think you're in charge, you'll be discarded because you're not in charge. Poland doesn't have a say, doesn't have a vote, doesn't have a voice. Poland is nothing. Nothing. You're being used by the West. You think you're in charge. You think that you have, you have a vote on this, but you have no vote. None whatsoever. What's your relevance if America withdraws its troops from Poland? And what are you doing to keep American troops there? Understand, American troops will only be there so long as the United States views their presence as being in the strategic interests of the United States of America. They're not there to do Poland's bidding. They're not there to enhance Poland's stature. They're there to enhance America's stature at the expense of Poland. That's it.
Scott, what do you think Biden administration, of course not Biden himself, but those who pull the string of the puppet, what they're gonna tell Polish president and Polish prime minister during this visit?
Oh, I think we'll blow smoke at them. We'll tell them that the United States, that, Article 5 is a sacred obligation, that America will always be there for Poland, that we will not allow Russia to take 1 inch of Poland. And, of course, we will have more troops there, and we will strengthen NATO's resolve, and we expect Poland to pay it, pull its share. But if you go into Ukraine, you're on your own. I think that's what the United States is going to tell them. Is just stop the nonsense, end it now, because we won't be there for you. If you go into Ukraine, you're on your own. And if you're on your own, that means that you've become a useless tool for us, and we'll just jettison you and move on. I think that's what they're going to be told. I don't think the United States is going to sit there and play stupid games. Remember, the president's in a presidential election cycle where he no politician is suicidal. He's part of a political party that wants to, stay in power, maintain a majority in the Senate, hopefully capture the White House, capture the House, govern America. Not because they want to do great things, but it's about power. It's about economic interest. That's how they enrich themselves. But you can't spend money if you're dead. You can't enjoy your Caribbean island lifestyle if there is no Caribbean island, if there is no America, if there is no world. So American politicians aren't suicidal. And they're not going to let Poland do something during this critical presidential election cycle, during this critical time. They're not going to let Poland alter the domestic political map in America. Poland's not a player. And I think the president's going to tell them that. Don't do anything. This disrupts my efforts here at home. Because the moment you do that, you become inconvenient to me. So he'll say all the right things, but I think the right signal will be for Poland to back down. That America is not going to tolerate any unilateral Polish action that puts the president of the United States in a politically difficult situation during this important, critical presidential election cycle.
Thank you. I really hope you're right in this case. I really do. But I have a little bit different feeling about it, you know. Scott,
Well,
I
I
never
mean,
asked this question.
no, I'm just saying that I come at it just from an American perspective, which, as we all know, doesn't mean it's right. You have your perspective, and I respect it tremendously. I'm a little cynical. I don't think America stands for anything anymore except the empowerment of American politicians. And we're at a critical juncture right now where the Democrats are desperate. They believe they're losing the White House, and one of the reasons why they're losing the White House is because of stupid decisions made regarding Ukraine. That they'd rather the Ukrainian problem go away for the time being, and they're not going to let Poland. No American president would let another. Look, we're already telling Israel you're impacting the presidential election. And so therefore you need to start changing the way you're doing things, because we don't want Gaza to be on the ballot in November. Well, we don't want Ukraine to be on the ballot in November, not in a negative way. If Ukraine's on the ballot, it's because we want to have rallied America behind the notion of confronting Russia. But right now we don't see that outcome happening. What we see is a calamity, this strategic defeat. So we'd rather take advantage of the short attention cycle of the Americans and have the defeat occur sooner rather than later. You see, if Ukraine collapses, if we have a negotiated settlement in May, no American will be talking about it come November, because that's just who we are.
Yeah, so like Shoigu said, 444,000 dead people after, no one will be talking about it.
We don't care about the Ukrainians. I mean, I don't understand. And I'm just telling you this about the Poles too. Guys, you can stack them as high as you want. Dead Polish bodies, stack them. We don't care. Maybe some neighborhoods in Chicago will care, where the Bears your fans hang out and they eat, Polish sausage and all that. But the average American isn't going to lose any sleep over Poland. We don't care about you. We've just shown that we're willing to stack 500,000 Ukrainians and not shed a tear. And so you really think that we're going to weep over dead Polish people, especially when they're committing suicide, doing stupid things? People do know that America is an inherently racist country. And so we are a nation that sits on a foundation of Polish jokes. And the Polish jokes are not complimentary to the Polish people. The Polish jokes imply that Polish people are inherently stupid. And if you want to implement policies that reinforce this prejudice, go ahead. The American people are more than happy to tell more Polish jokes about how stupid the Polish people are and how stupid their government is. We don't care about you. If you want to do something that results in dead Polish soldiers, dead Polish citizens, we don't care. America will not lose sleep. We don't care about tens of thousands of Palestinians. We don't care about hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. We didn't care about millions of Iraqis. We don't care. So quit pretending, Poland, that your lives matter, because they don't. There will be no Polish Life Matters printed out on American streets. We don't care about you. We really don't. Most Americans can't point you out on a map. So,
Well,
sorry to be that
right.
blunt.
No, but I think, unfortunately, this is the way to hit someone's ego in order for them to wake up. Because when the ego hurts, then maybe they start to think about it. And majority of Polish people at this point, Scott, they know what's going on. They don't want to participate in any war, and they are not going to die for Ukraine. They don't. This is Polish-speaking government. Again, I repeat this like, old records story, but that's what it is. You said that Americans don't share tears about Ukrainians. You know what came to my mind? Aaron Bushnell. Not everyone shared the tear about American person who shared the tear about Palestinians.
Well,
So I never asked you the, yeah.
let's look at that.
Yeah.
Let's look at that just a little bit, Aaron. I mean, he committed an extreme act. I don't encourage anybody to do what Aaron did, not at all. And as I've said before, if I were on active duty, I would have done everything possible to prevent that, but it wouldn't have been by coddling the man. I would have had him arrested. I would have had him prosecuted for interfering with the movement of troops in a time of war. The issue of constitutionality of a military order is an issue that's above the pay grade of Aaron. It's above the pay grade of me. If I receive a movement order as an active duty military officer, my job is to get my Marines from point A to point B in a timely fashion. That's the execution. Now, if that job involves me, murdering people, killing people, I can disobey the order at that time. Aaron was talking about policy issues, issues of genocide. If he believed in this, he should have gone to the staff judge advocate and he should have filed a constitutional challenge to the orders. At that time, he would have been detained. He would have been placed under some sort of house arrest. He would have been given the counseling necessary. He'd be alive today. And ultimately, I think that this issue would have gone up and the staff judge advocate would have said that there is no constitutional basis to find the order sending Aaron and others to Israel to be a violation of the law. It's a lawful order and you have to execute it. And this is the harsh reality of American military service. When you join, again, you get to determine, again, if you're told, kill that prisoner of war, that is an unconstitutional order. Unlawful order can't be executed. If you are in a position where you're told to target those Palestinian civilians, you can say that is an illegal order. I refuse to carry out that order. You get to make that choice. That's when you get, but you cannot say, I refuse to deploy because I assume that my deployment will result in a situation that could put me in a place where I might be asked to participate in an unlawful activity. I'm sorry, you don't get to do that. Aaron doesn't get to do that. Nobody gets to do that. And so I'm being a little harsh on Aaron right now because I think we have to be real here. He did something that is, I mean, I understand where he's coming from as a human being. Now, if he had done this without wearing the Air Force uniform, I'd say, okay, you're making a choice about, as an American citizen. But he wrapped himself in the American Air Force uniform, and it's a little bit more complex at that point in time. Not from an emotional standpoint. Hell, nobody wanted him to burn to death, and everybody has to understand the passion that existed in this man to cause him to carry out this action. I mean, and what's happening in Palestine is horrible, horrible. It is genocide. We know it's genocide. There's no debating that it's genocide. None. I'm not sitting here pretending that it's not genocide. I'm harshly critical of the Israelis for what they're doing. I condemn them wholeheartedly. I'm just saying that to have an active duty Air Force member commit suicide because he was protesting what's going on in Gaza, it's just not the right mix of things. He should never have been put in the situation that he's been put in. I condemn his leadership for not following him more carefully and not intervening to prevent this from happening. He posted things online that should have resulted in interventions, should have been resulted in people coming in and talking to him, maybe his security clearance being revoked, maybe him being pulled out of his position, any number of ways that this thing could have been intervened. But, unfortunately, in the military, we have bad leaders, people who aren't following through, aren't doing what's necessary. And Aaron was allowed to progress to situation where he felt that he had no other choice but to do this. If I were his commanding officer, I would have sat him down. I would have brought in a lawyer. I would have talked to him about this situation. And I would say, if you want to make this decision that this is an unlawful order, then we're going to give you the opportunity to articulate this, make this case now to the staff judge advocate, and we'll bump it up the chain of command. But until that time, you're under arrest, because the military isn't civilian life. You don't have the right of free speech. You have rights, but you don't get to sit there and disobey orders. If you allowed everybody to say, well, I question this, I question that, I question this, we don't have a functioning military anymore. And I'm just being harsh. I'm being real. This is a tragedy, what happened, a real tragedy. And but I do think we need to understand that he was an active duty military person who was never given an unlawful order. He was never given an unlawful order. He was given an order that he didn't agree with. But I'm sorry, you raised your hand. You took an oath to the Constitution. You're going to be given orders that you don't agree with. That's the nature of military service. But it wasn't an unlawful order. He was never asked to commit genocide. He made assumptions that somehow his deployment could result in a situation where he would be doing something related to genocide. And maybe his assumptions were correct, but the time to step up and say this is an unlawful order is at the time an actual unlawful order is issued, not when you receive a movement order to Israel, because that's not an unlawful order.
Scott, 576,000 people in Gaza are one step away from famine. I quite often put those videos on my community page in which you can see the images how Israel's army is shooting and killing even those who are simply gathering to get food. I want to ask you a simple question, because I'm really trying to understand why the Israeli army is so cruel and why this cruelty does not stop.
Look, I'm torn by that question. I'll tell you why. I spent a lot of time in Israel working with the Israeli Defense Forces, working with Israeli intelligence in the 1990s. From 1994 until 1998, I traveled there over 14 times, oftentimes for as long as 2 weeks, where I would just work intimately with Israeli officers. And I got to know them as professionals, and I got to know them as friends. I mean, you don't spend that much time with people without learning about them, their families, what they believe in, etc. And even though the problem set that we worked on was Iraq, it's a small military, and oftentimes issues bled over. I'll give you an example. I was working with the Israelis on drones, on how to bring drone capabilities into Iraq. And the Israelis took me down to one of their frontline drone units, where I got to talk to a drone operator, but I also got to observe a mission being flown over Lebanon, which means they were going after Hezbollah. The mission didn't have any kinetic aspect to it, so nobody lost their life on this mission. Just in case anybody's out there, oh, you were a participant in that. No, I was observing drone operations. I was observing how a drone flies over a piece of territory, gathers information, communicates that information back, so that I could imagine projecting the same capability into Iraq. But you meet people and you talk to people and you start talking about, Hezbollah targeting. That was the issue, targeting. How do you differentiate? And so they went through, their targeting processes. They went through the checks and balances that they would use to determine, whether this was a target that could be struck, or this is a target just to be monitored, or this is a target that not. But what I saw in talking to them, what I heard was a military that was very professional in their approach. Now, I know people are going to go back and say, well, Scott, they did this, that. I'm not defending anything. I'm just telling you that my experience was of a professional military that very much put morality on the line. Remember, this is in the 1990s, before, all this stuff. But it was the time also when Hamas was actively involved in blowing things up. And this was very personal because every time I went to Israel, on every one of these trips, Hamas did something. Sometimes they did it literally a few hundred yards from where I was. Sometimes they blew up a restaurant where I ate the day before. Sometimes they blew up a mall that I'd been shopping at earlier that morning. You sort of take it personally in here. You're like, I live, because you become immersed in the Israelis were not my enemies. When I was in Israel, I was there as their guest. So I viewed this as sort of like an extension of my terrain, my territory. Like if you go visit, Rome, while you're a tourist in Rome, even though it's not your country, Rome's yours, right? You sort of say, this is, I'm here. Rome is mine. I'm here to enjoy Rome. I'm one with Rome. So I was in Israel. I was one with Israel. I was, feeling a communal spirit to them. And so when a bomb blows up and kills people, I took that personally. I spoke with the Israelis who were responsible for hunting down and terminating the life of the man they called the engineer, the guy who was designing the bombs that were killing the Israelis. And we talked about how they did that, how they accomplished that, and the mechanisms they went through to make sure that when the time came to kill him, only he died. No one else died. Only he died. They could have killed him earlier. They could have dropped a bomb on a place and killed him and a whole bunch of other people. But back then, that's not how they operated. They made sure that they had a phone in his hand with a small amount of explosive in it. And then they said, "Is this you?" And he said, "Yes." And he hit the button and boom, off went his head, but only his head. And I bring this up because the Israeli military that I see today isn't this military. The Israel that I see operating today isn't the Israel that I experienced back then. Yes, there was political Zionism. Yes, Benjamin Netanyahu existed. Yes, there were these right-wing fanatics. Yes, one of those right-wing fanatics assassinated Yitzhak Rabin, a man who was, pursuing peace, an imperfect peace, perhaps. I'm not here to debate the merits of the Oslo peace process. I know there's a lot of people out there who say, well, it's a fake peace. Whatever. He was willing to head down a path that said, I'm choosing something other than the genocide of Palestine as an option. Whereas Netanyahu was always about the genocide of Palestine. But, so in Israel, there was always this evil that resided in Israel, the Zionist evil that had no tolerance for the Palestinian people. And how did I know? Because the Israelis told me this. I worked with their national assessment people, and I watched how Iraq went from the number one threat to Israel when I started my work, dropped down to like number 8 on the chart. And one of the reasons why was because of the confidence in the work that the inspectors were doing in Iraq, confidence that was enhanced by the fact that the Israelis were helping us do important parts of that work. So they were confident in the outcome, in the results, which was the whole purpose of working with Israel to begin with. And so Iraq dropped from number 1 to number 8. What do you think number 1 was? In 1998, the number 1 threat to Israel was right-wing Jewish extremism. The people that pulled the trigger on Yitzhak Rabin, the people that talk about settlements, the people that are non-tolerant of relations with Palestinians. Most Israelis that I worked with said, we have to learn to live with these people as equals, or else there will be no peace. That was their motivation. We have to learn to live with these people as equals, or there will be no peace. But the other people that were there were saying, we need to eliminate these people because only when we eliminate them will there be peace. There was a balance in Israel, political balance, where the people who sought peace were actually able to control the political processes. But one thing that happened in the 1990s is that the floodgates opened from Russia and Ukraine, and these Jews, and many of them weren't Jews. I mean, that's a whole different story about how people exploited Aliyah and came to Israel claiming to be something they weren't because they wanted to leave the economic depression of post-Soviet Ukraine or post-Soviet Russia. But they flood in, and these people were extraordinarily intolerant of Arabs, of Palestinians. And they helped tip the scale in favor of these fanatic right-wing people. And over the years, we see what has happened. They've produced the Israel of today. The IDF today operates something, and I'm going to mess the name up, but basically you can enlist in the, because it's conscription service. So you can be an Israeli who enlists and does normal, and most secular Israelis join up and they do, 2.5, 3 years service, and then they're done. 36 months, something of that nature, which I think is 3 years. But you can, if you're a Talmudic scholar, if you're a Orthodox religious Jew, you can join through a yeshiva or a school where you serve in the military. You're a soldier, but you're also doing full-time Talmudic studies. And the reason why I use Talmudic studies is that these are people who are not studying the Torah. They're not studying the Bible. It's Talmudic script. It is basically a whole separate set of religious teachings that aren't linked to the word of the Bible, but rather the attitude of Talmudic scholars, rabbis who are interpreting this. And the interpretations that come out of Talmudic studies are things that talk about the legitimacy of rape, the legitimacy of murder, if you're a goy or a non-Jew, how you have no rights. And it's a mindset of intolerance towards anybody who's not a Jew. And so now you have these yeshivas with these soldiers who are studying, and now they're going out and doing their duty. And their duty is mainly suppressing Arabs, suppressing Palestinians, and they hate them. I always looked at Israeli soldiers because, like I said, I hung out with them a lot in the 1990s. And the guys I hung out with, to be honest, were primarily secular. They like to drink beer. They like to talk about stuff that guys like to talk about in the military. They were just good people. And I look at the Israelis today who gather around in these giant clumps of Jewish fanaticism, dancing, singing songs, praising the death of Palestinians, proclaiming their desire to commit genocide. They go out and they commit atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. I'm saying those guys aren't the guys that I worked with. Those guys aren't the guys that I dealt with. Those guys are religious fanatics. And that's one of the problems, is that the IDF has become a foundation of religious fanaticism, religious Zionism. They've become the tool of intolerance. They used to be a professional military force, or at least a conscript military force that had professionalism imbued in them. Today, they are literally an army out of control, especially when it comes to responding to the Palestinian issue, because they don't view the Palestinians as humans, especially as Talmudic students. They view the Palestinians as animals because the Talmud says they are animals, and they treat them as animals, and there is no accountability for this. So literally the IDF has become a machine specifically designed to commit genocide. That's the reality of it today. It's a horrible, horrible institution. It's an institution completely void of honor. The Israelis call it the most moral army in the world. It's the most immoral army in the world. They are doing things that it's incomprehensible. Incomprehensible. The story of the 5-year-old girl should break the heart of every human being alive. Her family was killed. Her uncle, her aunt, her 2 cousins, they were killed trying to drive away from the scene. Her elder cousin, a 15-year-old girl, survived, and she was on the phone with Palestinian medics saying, "We've been shot. They're coming. Help me, help me." Then you hear the machine gun fire, and you hear the bullets impacting her body, and you hear her die. Now, that was supposed to be the end of that family, and that's not alone. That happens every day in Gaza, where families are killed like this. But then a couple days later, the phone comes back on, and it's her 5-year-old cousin who's calling. She's surrounded by decomposing bodies. Could you imagine that, being 5 years old? And there's a scene out of the Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's masterpiece, and there was a character in the book who was a religious man, and basically people had imbued upon him some sort of mystical, godlike nature, because he was a religious man. He was a good man, good heart. So when he died, people were somehow feeling that it was going to be about incense and angels and all this. But back then they didn't embalm, and his body started decomposing rapidly. And people suddenly saw the reality that he was just flesh. The decomposition caused them to radically review how they felt about this guy. Could you imagine being 5 years old and you have an aunt and an uncle who are like parents to you? You look at them like they're godlike figures. I mean, what 5-year-old kid doesn't look at their father or their mother and say, these are gods, these are living gods, they can do no wrong. They control my life. They look at their elder cousins and again, look up to them with respect as humans, as again, larger than life beings. And now to be in a car and these people that you looked up to as being gods, not just dead, but decomposing. You go insane. She's calling for help. And the lady's on the line talking to her. And the words that come out of this girl's mouth, she's scared. She's saying, I'm scared. Come get me. Again, when you're 5 years old and you tell an adult, come get me, they tend to come and get you because that's the relationship, isn't it? I need help. The adults come and they help me. So she's talking to an adult, come get me. Nobody's coming. Nobody can come because the Israelis won't let it happen. The tank is coming closer. I'm scared. Come get me. This happens every day. Every day. Mothers cross the street with their children, waving white flags, and snipers kill them. Surgeons are doing surgery, and a gap opens up in the window because there's no air conditioning, so you have to keep windows open so some air comes in. An Israeli sniper positions himself so he can aim in through the gap and shoot the surgeon while he's doing surgery. They tie a man's arms and have him walk out and murder him. Every day, the Air Force drops bombs on tent cities that they know only contains civilians. Every day. These are murderers. This isn't war. This isn't collateral damage. This isn't a Marine checkpoint in Iraq that had a car bomb go off the other day that killed a couple of their Marines, seeing a car come at them and not stopping, not knowing that the man inside is scared to death with a pregnant woman and kids that are screaming. He can't hear anything. All he wants to do is get to safety. But the Marines see the car coming and they say, that's another car bomb. Put a round in the radiator. The car keeps coming. Take him out. And they kill him. This isn't that. That happened, and that's tragic, and that's horrible. This is Israeli soldiers deliberately targeting civilians for the sole purpose of murdering them, for the sole purpose of imbuing terror in the hearts of the survivors so they flee. It's genocide, 100% taking place every single day, and they're using American weapons that are paid for by American taxpayer money, and we're not doing a damn thing about it. There. Sorry.
So here is the question. I think it's a good segue to this question. I never asked you this question before. Even though you are actually the guest who probably knows the most or interacted the most with Joe Biden. Scott, how do you feel? This is honestly, I would like to know. How do you feel, or what do you think, or maybe feel rather, when you look at Biden now?
That's a complicated question. I've always despised Joe Biden, straight up despised the man, never respected him at all. He was the scummiest of politicians back then, and nothing he ever did impressed me on him, changing that outlook. He's a man who is responsible for horrific crimes against the American people. If I were a Black American, I would never vote for Joe Biden. He's one of the most racist people that walks the face of the earth. You remember caught off camera or, caught on hot mic about Barack Obama. Well, he's clean and he's articulate. He's one of them, but he's clean and articulate. What are you trying to say, Joe? That you don't respect Black people? Well, he doesn't, because he, basically created open door policy for Blacks to be stuffed into American prisons because he didn't want a jungle. Meanwhile, his son is doing things that if he were black and not related to Biden, would put him in jail for life. But no, he's white. He's Biden. He's privileged. Not a problem. He's a hypocrite, and he's just not a good person. He's a liar. He's a cheater. He's just scum, human scum. And I didn't support him being president. Now he's the commander in chief, and if I were on active duty, unfortunately, I would have to obey his orders, and I wouldn't be allowed to articulate my opinions this way. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. He's senile. I mean, I've been around people with Alzheimer's. I mean, back when I was with the fire department, I would often drive the ambulance. My wife was an EMT, and so whenever she was on duty, I would take off my firefighter hat, put on my ambulance driver hat, and we respond to the community. And oftentimes, you respond to places that have Alzheimer's patients, and they have homes where these people are. And I remember the frustration of the families. We'd come in there, and here's this person, and they're swearing, they're vile, they're just saying horrible things. And the kids are there, the adult kids, and they're crying. They said, that please don't look at that person and think that that's not who that person is. That was the sweetest lady in the world. She was my mother. She was an angel. She never spoke. But when you go through Alzheimer's, when you go through dementia, your brain no longer works, and things are said. Plus, you lose physical capacity. I mean, I've met professional football players who are in their late 80s, and I remember seeing them play. These were monsters. I mean, these were monsters. These were guys that dominated physically, and then you look at them, and they're totally. It makes me afraid of getting old, to be honest, because I take a look at the deterioration of the human body and how the capacity to live is gone there. So there's people today that make fun of Joe Biden because of the way he walks. I don't. Because even though I hate the man, the guy who's walking there isn't Joe Biden. That's a human body that's failing. The man's brain is not there. It's not totally gone, but it's not there. And so I have to always take a step back now when it comes to, because my first gut feeling is I hate him, I despise him, and I almost become irrational about him. But then the human in me takes a step back and says, that's not Joe Biden. If it was, I'd hate him, but that's not Joe Biden. That's a man who has lost physical capacity and mental capacity and deserves compassion at this point in his life. He deserves to be taken by the hand and led to a safe place where he can function without, anybody worrying that because of his incapacity, people might suffer for it. But instead, he's the president of the United States, and he's making decisions, or decisions are being made for him. I'd really like to know who's running this show.
Obama,
I didn't.
right?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of talk about that behind the scenes, Obama, Hillary Clinton. What I would say is this. This is the danger. People always poo-pooed the deep state. Oh, there's no deep state. That's a conspiracy theory. We're a democratic constitutional republic. We have checks and balances. We have this, that, and the other thing. Well, what happens when you have a president who's non-functional and the vice president's still the vice president? Who's calling the shots? Where in the Constitution does it say you get to have a secret cabal of people who we don't know? So we don't know if they're elected, appointed. We don't know anything about them, but we do know that they're functioning in a way that the Constitution didn't envision happening, because the Constitution said when the president loses the ability to govern, I think it's amendment, the 24th Amendment, I think, you step in and the vice president can come in and do it. But the vice president's not stepping in. The man's clearly diminished, but they're playing games now. And so he's allowed to govern, but who's making the decisions? Who's writing the cards that he speaks from? Who puts those words to paper? What's the last voice he hears before he goes to bed at night? What's the first voice he hears in the morning? We should know this. We should know how the decision-making process takes place. While it may be his signature on a piece of paper, who is responsible for putting those words down? Who makes final approval? Is the president cognizant of what he signs? Is he aware of everything that's done in his name? And the answer, I think, is no. And therefore, who's running this country? And it
Who
ain't
is the
somebody.
wizard, Scott? Who is the wizard?
Where's the Wizard of Oz? Who's the man behind the screen, pulling the levers? Um, and if we didn't vote for these people, and even if we did, if they're not functioning in a way that was envisioned, they're supportable by the Constitution, then we have a big problem in America today. You know, there's people out there who rightfully can. I'm not going to condemn anybody who says Donald Trump's an affront to American democracy. I don't necessarily agree with everything they say, but there's enough problems with Donald Trump where you can say I'm not comfortable with him being the president because maybe his appreciation of constitutional democracy doesn't match mine. That's a legitimate thing. We can have an honest to God discussion about that. But understand right now with Donald Trump, we're talking about theory. With Joe Biden, we're talking about reality. Right now, the greatest threat to a democratic constitutional republic is Joe Biden, because the way his administration works is not the way envisioned by the founding fathers, the framers, when they wrote the Constitution. And this is a very scary thing, because if people can make these decisions, pull these strings, who's giving Anthony Blinken his marching orders? Who's giving Jake Sullivan their marching orders? And this is where it gets scary, because all the supporting cast for Joe Biden are Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama loyalists. And I would imagine that they spend a lot of time on the phone or talking to Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to get guidance, because the president's non-functioning. The vice president's been unplugged and cast aside. The Speaker of the House, third in line, is from a different party that they don't want to have anything to do with. And so in order to stay in power, in order to continue to be able to control the levers, they're relying upon, an establishment that's unelected.
I want to say something here, Scott, and I know this is I don't use this word often, that CIA has created conspiracy, but I will make a statement here. I think, in my humble opinion, all those people, and I agree with some comments, it's not even Obama who's running the show. There are people whose names we will never know, who are pulling the strings behind even the bankers and the politicians. Yes, there are some families, we know them, but there are some people which we will never know their names, and those are the ones who are doing this. And in a way, when you were saying all of this, I was thinking, in a way, that is actually a perfect scenario how to destroy America, to have administration like this, because that's what they want.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not happy at all with the state of play in America today. And again, I'm somebody, I don't want to generate too much controversy on your podcast, but I think people know that I'm not a big fan of what I call 9/11 conspiracies. I'm not a big fan of them. I don't, people are like, why aren't you listening to Ryan Dawson? And I keep saying, well, Ryan and I talk all the time. I'm open to discussing this and all that, but I'm not a big conspiracy theory. I believe in I believe more in incompetence over, because conspiracies require a lot of intelligent people to be doing things in a way that they don't get caught. And I just, knowing humans the way I do, I believe in competence. I believe that people are incompetent and things happen because they're incompetent. But when you take a look at what's going on right now, this is designed. This is designed. This isn't an accident. This isn't incompetence. This is a design flaw. And we've known about it for some time now. Citizens United allows money to take control of the democratic process. Corporations become, Scott is naive about 9/11. I said I didn't want to go there. I'm just pointing it out about my conspiracy thing. But the fact of the matter is, there's a design flaw here. Money controls everything. It's what drives politics here. And then you have to ask yourself, where's the money coming from? If it's not coming from the U.S. taxpayer, if it's not coming from, appropriated by the United States Congress, then that's an outside influence, and we have to acknowledge that. And what we've done is we've allowed these moneyed elites to control American politics. But it's not just American politics, it's everything we do. Um, who goes to Yale? Who goes to Harvard? Who goes to Stanford? Who goes to Georgetown? Not Joe Blow America, not Jill Blow America. You shouldn't use Joe and Jill because it's the president and his wife. So we have to come up with more typical American names. Bob and Cindy, whatever. But the average American, Joe Plumber, they don't go to Harvard, and therefore they're not part of the club. They're not part of the gang that now comes out there and falls in on what is in effect a sinecure, an automatic job, employment, rich, a lifestyle. It's there, and they fall into the circles that make decisions. And a lot of these decisions, are done outside of government. Who makes the decisions, for instance, for you to get into the Council of Foreign Relations? It's not a government entity. It's not, but it has more influence on foreign policy than many government officials because it's staffed with the so-called political elite. When I resigned from my job as a weapons inspector, I was considered for a Council for Foreign Relations fellowship. And I saw the process from inside. I mean, first of all, there's money. These things are, it's not like the Council for Foreign Relations is sitting on a whole big pock of money going, well, let's bring in Ritter here. Boom. You have to find sponsors who are willing to underwrite it. And those sponsors tend to have Jewish last names. And I'm just being honest here. And therefore, to get in, you have to be somebody that AIPAC vets, somebody that the American Jewish Congress vets, things of that nature. And I saw that. And when I first resigned, people interpreted what I was saying as being very pro-Israel. It's not. It just happened to be that the stance I was taking was one that Israel agreed with. Until I got into intelligence involvement and started being honest about the CIA manipulation, which required me to be honest about everybody who was involved in this, which brought Israel into the play. And suddenly I was inconvenient to the Israelis. And it was amazing because I was literally that close. I mean, keep back, missed opportunities. I was this close, Anya, to becoming one of them. Because, once you step across that and they bring you in, they suck you in. And then you're talking, you don't even realize you've been sucked in. You're just sitting there going, oh, you want me to attend a conference? Okay, I'll attend the conference. You want me to write a paper and you're going to publish it? Yeah, I'll do that. Paycheck. Wow, that's a nice paycheck. I've never had a paycheck this big in my life. Hey, honey, we get to go on vacation now. Honey, remember the pathetic little home that we're renting right now? We can go buy a house in a nice neighborhood and we can send our kids to good schools because every parent wants to send their kid to a good school. You don't want to send them to a school where there's, crime and drugs and all this. You want to send them to a good school where the crime is under the table and the drugs are elite drugs that everybody does in their girlfriend's or boyfriend's home. Who knows? I'm just saying that I don't want to pretend that there's not crime and drugs in the political elite, but I was that close. And then I made a decision that I wasn't going to play that game. I turned down a multi-million-dollar offer to become one of them. And I've kicked myself in the butt many times since then because, when the end of the month comes, like right now, and you're going, where are the bills? Oh, they're right here in front of me. A lot of them, by the way, a whole bunch of bills. And you're going, how am I going to pay those bills? And generally what happens is you get one and you say, well, this is going to have to wait until next payday because I can't pay this bill and buy groceries and, pay the mortgage and pay the electricity bill. So the bill gets waited. Then you get the phone calls. You're late. Don't worry. I'll pay you come the middle of the month. And then you do that. But then the middle of the month comes and there's another bill and you got to push it. That's my life. That's the reality of life. Almost every American lives that life. They were offering me a situation where I never had to worry about bills again. Never would have had to worry about bills again. And to be honest, see the gray hairs that I have? Most of that comes from money issues. For all the people out there that say Russia's paying you a great salary, A, I don't work for Russia. B, I'll never work for Russia. And C, what little bit of money I make from RT is what I get from writing articles. They don't give me anything. I do write the occasional article for RT, and I get compensated at a rate lower than compensation that I would get from an equivalent American outlet, who I write for, by the way. Nobody says, Scott, Consortium News owns you. Joe Loria owns you. Hey, Joe, do you own me? Joe's like, shut up, Scott. I want you to write another article, but you're too damn busy to write it, and when I write the article, I think I can count on two fingers the times where Joe came back and said, we need to talk about this. We need to do this. And Joe and I will fight about it, and we make a compromise, not a compromise of character or of integrity, just different approaches. I've never had that issue with RT, ever. I say, this is the article I want to write. They come back and they say, thank you. Can we change this word because we don't understand what you're, and I look at it and say, oh, that's my bad English, not your bad English. Thank you for being better English speakers than me. And they fix it and we publish it. But I get compensated by RT. But the idea that I work for Russia, that I take Russia's orders, that I do Russia's bidding is absurd in the extreme. Why in God's name would I compromise everything for this when I refuse to compromise everything for this? I mean, I'm telling you, the package that was put on the table, the golden key hung before me, would have given me this. I didn't take it. Sometimes I regret it, especially when I'm looking at the bills. I'm like, God, it'd be nice not to worry about the bills. But then you realize that you didn't sell your soul. But that's the way it is. But I was this close to getting into the Council of Foreign Relations and not knowing that it required me to sell my soul. When the Jewish lobby said, no, we're not letting him in because we don't own him. He's not going to do. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that anybody who's with the Council of Foreign Relations is owned, straight up owned. If you're teaching at Stanford, you're owned. If you're teaching at Harvard, you're owned. If you're teaching at Yale, you're owned. If you're attending those places, you're owned. They own you. And they own your life forever and ever, unless you're willing to walk away, which very few people are. But this is the establishment. It's non-governmental. It's an academic elite. If you're working in a bank, you're owned. If you're working in Wall Street, you're owned. You are part of a system that corrupts you with money. And once you buy into that money, once you make a lifestyle dependent upon that money, you don't want to back out from it. It's the greatest narcotic in the world because money brings with it the illusion of luxury. You get to hang out with the beautiful people. You get to buy the beautiful wife, or if you're the woman, you get to buy the beautiful husband. You get to hang out at the right clubs, have the right mistresses, have the right lovers, have, all the things that make you think you're going to live forever. And then when you get old, you want to, hold on to that as much as possible. You're like the Rothschilds sitting there all decrepit and old, but continuing to, buy people off and control things and all that. I know a lot of very wealthy people. And I can say that of the wealthy people I know, again, that many are truly moral people who use their money for good things, people who were, and the interesting thing about the people who use their money for good things is they're not seeking publicity. They're not seeking power. They already have it. They have the lifestyle. They're seeking to make qualitative changes in life, to do the right thing. That's such a rare breed. It would be nice if everybody who had money did that, because then we wouldn't have this deep state, this deep establishment. Things would be done out in the open. But this deep state is real. It exists, and it's not constitutional. It's not democratic. It's not even part of a republic. It's this shadow system that if we don't call it out and we don't do something to dismantle it, is going to take over every aspect of our life to the point where individuals like you and me, we just don't matter at all. We cease to matter because the system isn't designed to take us into account. I think you're muted.
I wanted to end this video here, but I promised from our live stream that we had last time, there were 2 questions from the viewers, and I would really like to ask those questions.
Okay.
The first one is from Uralic Tribes, and he says, Hungary has just recently blocked another EU sanction against Russia. Should Russia have any concerns about NATO or EU sending their tanks to Budapest in a 1956 style?
No, that's not NATO style. NATO operates with the money, and it's more concerned about buying off Hungary or threatening to destroy Hungary financially or economically. NATO tanks aren't going to be rolling through the streets of Budapest.
Okay, and the last one, a little more complex answer, I think. It's from Santanu Chatterjee. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Why do you think the West hates Russia so much? This is a loaded question, I know, but why the West hates Russia so much, Scott?
One, we don't understand them, and we don't want to understand them. We operate under the principle of if you're like us, if you are part of this club, you're okay. But Russia's not part of this club. Russia's never been part of this club. Russia may have wanted to be part of the club, but we didn't want Russia to be part of the club. And so we don't understand Russia. Therefore, if you don't understand it, then you have to control it. So we don't understand Russia, so we're going to box Russia up and put it over here because we need to control it. We don't understand it, but we want to keep it under control so that we're in charge, because ultimately that's what it's about. We're in charge. America is the exceptional nation. We're the indispensable nation. We've convinced ourselves of this. Our history is one that's imbued with the notion of manifest destiny. I mean, it's straight out of the Crusades. If you remember, the Crusader call, God wills it. God wills it. Well, there's no nation today that exists with a greater notion of God wills it than America. God willed us to declare our independence. God willed us to have manifest destiny. God willed us to destroy the Native Americans. God willed us to enslave Black people. God willed us to exploit Chinese labor. God willed us to exploit Italian labor and Irish labor until we decided that because they were white, they could be like us and become part of the club. God willed us to go across the Pacific, to conquer Hawaii, to conquer the Pacific Islands. God willed us to, go into Europe and save our fellow Christians, because that's what we're all about. God is a Christian God. It's not a Muslim God, Christian God. And then God willed us to allow this Christian God to be changed from, one that Europe could identify with, to this unique notion of American evangelicalism. It's captured America, where, it doesn't matter that the Constitution says there will be no state religion. We have a state religion. It's evangelical Christianity. They are seeking to dominate every aspect of our life from Christian. We just saw an Alabama Supreme Court justice talk about in vitro fertilization, and his whole argument's based upon religion. Sorry, that's not how it works, pal. You're allowed to have your religious beliefs, and I respect your religious belief, but there is no state religion. You just made religion a state issue by allowing your religious beliefs to guide a legal argument that's unsustainable under the Constitution. But this is America today. We have allowed evangelical Christianity to capture every aspect of our life, or at least challenge every aspect of our life. And so when you have this, when you are operating under the notion that America has a God-given right to be of exceptionalism, because that's what we're saying. I mean, again, Joe Biden, American presidents may not realize what they're doing, but God bless America and God bless our troops. What does that mean? Why would God bless America? Why don't you say, God bless humanity? That would be a better statement, because that means now that you recognize that all humans are children of God, if you believe in God. But no, God bless America. That means God damn the rest of the world. That's what it says. Put us ahead. We're the anointed ones. We're the special ones. God wills it. And so when you look at that, and then you look at a nation like Russia, who you don't understand to begin with. I mean, they're Christians, but they're not like us. They're not our Christians. They're weird Christians. They're them Orthodox Christians, and they're not even with the Pope. They have their own thing. It's the Orthodox matriarch there, and I mean, it's not even out of Constantinople. They want to call it out of Moscow. Moscow Christian. No, I don't understand this, man. It's confusing to me. So, no, we don't respect them as Christians. They're different. They had the Mongol influence. The Mongols are the Golden Horde. Genghis Khan came through there. We read that someplace. Putin was talking about that. So no, they're not humans like us. And God forbid the Russians stand up and say, hey, we want a seat at the table. No, you don't get a seat at the table. You're Russians. You're Ruskies. Weren't you communists for a while? Bolshevik, communists. You had that communist thing going on there. Scratch a Russian, get a commie. Kill a commie for mommy. No. Americans are the most ignorant people in the world about the world we live in. And when you throw something as complex as Russia at them, they can't even begin to understand it. So we fear Russia because we don't understand Russia, and therefore we want to take things down. It's not like, again, if we said God bless humanity. Imagine if we said that, and then we see the Russians and we don't understand them. What would the notion be if a good Christian person would walk across the street and say, hey, how you doing? I'm Scott Ritter. Glad to meet you. I'm American. I live over here in America. And who are you? Oh, you're Ivan. And your wife, Natasha, Ivan and Natasha. And you're from Russia? Wow, how interesting. And that's Russia over there? Well, that's a cool looking house. It's not like my house, but it's cool. You guys want to come over? Say hi. You want us to come over and say hi to you? Want to visit? Here, I'll bring you some apple pie. What you're giving me? What is pelmeni? What is pelmeni? Looks like a dumpling, but it's a Russian dumpling. And you say I should eat it with I should put some pepper on it with sour cream. Damn, that tastes good. That's good stuff. How you like the apple pie? Pretty good, huh? We put some ice cream on it too, and let me give you some little Cool Whip on it there. And it's American. And pelmeni and ice cream, man, we've done good here. Let's have a picnic next week. And we're getting along. And we're friends. And we start to understand each other. And we incorporate things because I like that pelmeni. So I make that part of my American thing. And who knows? Ivan and Natasha may like apple pie. And they may ask me for my ice cream maker so they can make some vanilla bean ice cream and put it on there. And we're getting along great because we don't fear each other, because we respect each other as human beings. God bless humanity. But God bless America. And now I view you as a threat. You ain't like me. Why are you making pelmeni? Why is she wearing a kerchief on her head? Muslims wear kerchiefs on her head. Why is she a Muslim? No, we said we're Orthodox Christian. Well, what is an Orthodox Christian? Why do you cross yourselves that way? Why are you doing that? What's going on here? I can't understand. Why, when you speak or you speak Russian, I need to understand what's going on. I'm a little concerned. You're talking behind my back here. And then we fear them. And then we don't invite them to the table. And when they insist on being at the table because it's their right, we then want to destroy them. We want to blow them up. We want to kill them. And that's what's going on here. Fear and ignorance. Fear and ignorance. And American arrogance. You wrap it in American arrogance. And there's the problem. I mean, America is the world's biggest problem. Straight up. We should be the world's greatest solution. We should be the people that the world turns to and says, hey, you're sort of rich and wealthy. Why don't you come here and help us out? But see, we can't help you out of the kindness of our hearts. We can only help you out if we get an advantage. What's in it for us? What's in it for us? So much for Christianity, because Christianity I thought was about helping people. Here's the shirt off my back. I'll raise funds. I'll charitable contributions. I'm here, not a selfless service. Did Jesus wake up every morning and go, what's in it for me? Come on, Peter. Come on, James. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Mary, what's in it for me? No, that's not how Jesus operated. Not, I believe, but that's how America operates. What's in it for me? I'm sick of the fact that we call ourselves a Christian society. First of all, it's an insult to Muslim Americans. It's an insult to Buddhist Americans. It's an insult to people who say, I don't want to do religion, and America gives me that option. Christianity is a personal decision. If you want to embrace it, then live it. If you're going to call yourself a Christian, live it. Live the Christian lifestyle, which is supposed to be, again, selfless service to others. No, America's just nothing but we're just a huge nation of hypocrites from the top to the bottom. And if you believe that America is an exceptional nation, the exceptional nation, an indispensable nation, then you're the problem. You're not the solution. We're a nation. We're powerful. We have influence, but we should be using that influence for the betterment of the world, not just the betterment of America.
Thank you so much, Scott. Can I add one thing to what you just said?
Yeah.
I know this was a question to you, but since I'm still here in Moscow for a few more days, I will speak from my personal experience, because I think usually, let's say, people hate people when they are jealous of those people. So why the West hates Russia is because the West is jealous of Russia, is jealous of the resources, is jealous of the beauty, is jealous of the power that Russia has. And it's true. Russia is powerful and is beautiful and has a great culture and was able to maintain it. And that's why the West hates Russia, because Russia has the strength, the spirit, and the resources. Don't you think, Scott?
Yeah. Look, let's parse that out a little bit since you went down this route. Tucker Carlson, I'm not going to get to Tucker did what Tucker did. I think that 1 billion people watched his interview, and I think that's a good thing. I think he could have done a better job on his interview. That's fine. But Tucker explains things in a way that your average American, because we're dumber than dirt, can understand. And so Tucker wanted to show, why Russia isn't the world's worst country. So he went to a supermarket. You remember that? He got and he had the homeless proof, shopping cart. Look, you put a coin in, and if you put the coin, you get the coin back, and people return it. Won't be off doing other things. All right, people attack that, but he's sort of right. You don't see Russian homeless running around with a bunch of shopping carts. I can go literally right down the road here, and I can find 3 shopping carts on the hill that have been pre-positioned by the homeless community that lives on the hill at this time of year too, that everybody knows about, but nobody's doing anything about. There they are, the shopping carts, and they took them from the Walmart down the road, but because it's there and free picking. But that's not the point. The point is he went in, he filled it up with what he said was a week's worth of groceries. And he anticipated that it would cost, $400 some odd, and then it cost him $100 and some odd. And, he's like, see, you're not paying as much. And that's a good point too. But people were talking about, well, higher standard of living, da, 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 da. He said something interesting when he did the McDonald's thing. He said, tastes good, but there's no GMOs in it. And the implication was that the food was healthier. But even that's not really the point. That Tucker made a point without realizing he made the point. Ask yourself as you go through your supermarket, especially the vegetable section, where your vegetables come from. And most of your vegetables come from California. And they are harvested, and your citrus comes from Florida. Ask yourself how they're harvested. Who does the harvesting? And then ask yourself, at the same time you're asking yourself that question, ask yourself what your stance is on border security in Mexico, with Mexico. Because you do know that all that stuff that's harvested is harvested by primarily undocumented illegal aliens that come in from Mexico, who live a relatively slave-like existence. Even though we don't officially have slavery today, we definitely have indentured servants, especially undocumented aliens who have no rights and therefore are afraid to speak up when they get raped, when they're robbed, when they're abused, when contracts are violated. That's that. And so when you buy that, you're buying the system. You're saying, I approve of this system because I want fresh vegetables at a price I can afford. Now ask yourself how that stuff got to market in Russia. And you'll know that Vladimir Putin basically helped reform Russian agriculture, which was thrown into the dumps by Boris Yeltsin and broken by the Soviets. And he did it by encouraging private farmers to grow crops on their own territory, and then they would harvest that. Then they come together in a collective and they bring it in, the efficiency rate and all that stuff. But the bottom line is the Russian agricultural section is thriving today, and a large part of it is small property owners who have turned this into, a viable production. And it's not harvested by illegal aliens. It's harvested by Russians who pocket that money, and it's part of how the Russian economy is turned around. So it's not just healthier for you. The Russian produce is healthier for Russia because it comes from a system that is designed to strengthen Russia, not exploit the vulnerabilities of illegal aliens. So I don't know if Tucker realized he was making that point, but when I heard Jon Stewart, it's the price of freedom. Hey, John, you're a dick. And the reason why I say that is that Jon Stewart's famous for calling out Tucker Carlson. He helped destroy Tucker Carlson's career when Tucker was a talk show host on CNN's Crossfire. Jon Stewart went on that show and called Tucker Carlson a dick. And Tucker Carlson was a dick, and CNN fired him and closed down the show. So, Jon Stewart, I'm calling you out right now. I've been on your show. I used to like you, but you're a dick. That's not the price of freedom. That's the price of tyranny, you son of a bitch. You just sat there and said you're going to not do. This is a man who claims he wants to do things for people. I've seen Jon Stewart. He gets up there and supports different causes here, there, and everywhere. Some of the causes are worthy of support. But if you're going to sit there and say that's the price of freedom, then you're saying that you support slavery in America today, because that's how we get our crops. Modern day slavery. You support indentured servants. You support illegal immigrants being abused by a privileged population. That's the price of freedom, John. No. Anyways, sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah, that's how we moved from the farming to this. I don't know, but Scott, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really, really appreciate you answering all of my questions. Even though I said we will try to do it within an hour, we went over an hour. So I really appreciate. And to those of you who don't know, because Scott doesn't talk about it much, how to support Scott, the best way is to scroll down under this live stream and you see the link, Scott Ritter Extra. You go there and you find all the links to Scott, to his Twitter or X now, his books, where you can find him, where you can watch his videos as well. I think 2 channels right now, right, Scott? You
yeah, we do the Tour of Duty channel. We're going to rename that because we have a marketing problem. Yeah. But we're gonna. It's where I do the Ask the Inspector show twice a week, and then I have the Scott Ritter show, which is a show where I interview Russians and try and bring their voice. So those are the 2 podcasts 3 times a week. Yeah. But I will say this, allow me to intervene and for anybody who came to this podcast today because you heard I was on it, and you're new to the Anya K product, subscribe to her channel. She's a fantastic interviewer. She does really good stuff. More diverse than just listening to my depressing rants. She's a person who has a soul, who has a heart, and that touches everything she does. So if you want to be, I guess, you put in a good frame of mind, this is a good place to be. So support Anya and subscribe to her channel.
Thank you, Scott. I'm just one of you guys. I'm one of you who is watching right now. I am trying to understand what the heck is going on and make sense out of it and ask questions from the right people, because this is the key. First have a question and then ask this question of the right person. Like you go to the source. You don't go around, you go straight to the source who will have the answer. So thank you, Scott, so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And to those of you who didn't hit this like, I appreciate if you do. And we see you perhaps in 2 weeks from now with Mr. Ritter. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.